Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. The case that I'm going to be looking into today is the case of Dr. Jeffrey MacDonald. Now, Jeffrey was not only a doctor, he was a United Army States captain who then went on to become an A&E doctor who was convicted of August 1979 of murder. There are a lot of people that do believe he's innocent. Obviously, that is up to you. I'm just going to relay the facts and everything in the case that we know, and you guys make your own mind up on whether you think he did it or not. This case was suggested by Donald, so thank you for that. I appreciate any suggestions you guys have, and I did find this one very interesting. Jeffrey Robert MacDonald was born on the 12th of October in 1943 to parents Robert and Dorothy in Queens, New York. He was the middle child of 3 children. His father growing up was very strict, but he was never violent to his family or his wife, but he demanded and expected obedience from them, if you get me, but he wasn't ever violent towards them. The family didn't really have a lot of money. They was raised in quite a poor household on Long Island. Jeffrey went to Patchogue High School, where he thrived. He became very popular. His classmates adored him. They even voted him most likely to succeed and most popular. Whilst he was in school, he met a girl called Colette Catherine Stevenson, and for a while they did date, but Colette eventually did call that off. He went on to get a scholarship at Princeton University and in 1962 enrolled as a pre-med student. He then began dating Colette again. They obviously must have either kept in touch or rekindled at some point, and he began dating her again, but he was also dating other women too. Now, Colette really relied on Jeffrey's self-confidence. He was a very bold, confident man, and she had grown into quite a shy, sort of inverted woman, and she really relied on him for his confidence in the world, whereas she didn't have it. So he's still dating Colette as well as these other women, and he finds out that she is actually pregnant with his child. So he vows to marry her in August of 1963. And Colette leaves college because she wants to raise her family. She wants to spend her time with the new arrival on the way. On the 14th of September, they got married, and on the 18th of April in 1964, their first daughter, Kimberly Catherine, was born. After he graduated Princeton, the family moved around a lot, and then he was accepted into Northwestern University Medical School. He began his studies, and then he took on a few different part-time jobs to sort of keep an income coming in. The family then moved to a middle-class neighborhood in Chicago, and it wouldn't be long before their second daughter came along. Kristen Jean was born on the 8th of May in 1967. He graduated from university the next year. They moved around a lot. It seems quite a thing that his family did. He did an internship for a year, which he didn't really like. He worked literally like 36 hours and spent 12 of those at home, and at this point he had a wife and 2 kids, so he didn't really get a lot of time with them. And when he was home, he was very tired after doing long hours like that, so he just didn't want to integrate with them in a sense, because he was just so tired. So not only did he not really like it, neither did his family. But it was only for a year, and so he muddled through that, and then when that finished, he decided that he was going to join the army. That was on the 28th of June in 1969. He did his training. He then eventually volunteered to be a special forces physician in the Green Beret. I believe the Green Beret, you don't really often get sent out, so there is the possibility, but it's very slim. So whether that was why he wanted to go there because he had a family and a wife and kids, I don't know. So in the August, him and his family moved to the army base of Fort Bragg in North Carolina. They had a section of the base that was kept for married officers and their families, so that they could be close to them, and so the family moved into 544 Castle Drive. They quickly became very popular with neighbours. They were very likeable people. And of course, they would argue, but every couple argues. That was just normal. At this point in time, Colette had done 2 years studying. She wanted to get a bachelor's degree in English literature because she wanted to become a part-time teacher. The 2 girls at this point had developed their own unique personalities. Kimberly was intelligent but shy and very much a girly girl. Kristen, on the other hand, was very much a tomboy and was boisterous and just wasn't afraid to go and defend her sister if she felt like she saw someone bullying her or something like that. She'd just go straight over there, even though she was the youngest. Colette fell pregnant again, and this time she was having a son. She was around 3 months pregnant around Christmas time of 1969, and that was a time of year when Jeffrey went out and actually bought his girls a Shetland pony. He figured the family would actually be moving out to a farm in Connecticut real soon, and so he gets this pony thinking that eventually it can go on their own farm. And I mean, what little girl doesn't love a pony? It was because a special forces group was deactivated and he was now serving as a preventative medical officer. So he buys this pony, he keeps it secret. His stepfather-in-law, Alfred Kassab, drives them all up there to go and see this little pony. And it was a surprise on Christmas Day. I mean, the girls were totally over the moon. They decided to call this pony Trooper. That same month, Colette sends this letter to her college friends of how she had never been so happy and how her life had never felt so normal. That her and Jeffrey were very content, that their son was due in July, and then her family would be complete. In 1970, Jeffrey became a captain in the army and was planning on studying advanced medical training after completing his tour of duty as a Green Beret doctor. Despite being this tentative husband who was, really thoughtful and loved his kids, apparently he was having a lot of affairs, which he started since they got married. Like I said, when he started dating Colette, he was dating other women too, so I guess he just carried on with that. I'm not sure whether Colette knew or anything like that, I don't know. But on the whole, everything seemed amazing for this family. So where did it all go wrong? On the 16th of February 1978, Jeffrey and the girls go out to see Trooper. They ride him, they feed him, and they arrive back home at around 5:44 p.m. Jeffrey goes as a shower, he gets in these blue pajamas before they all leave as a family. Colette then leaves because she has this teaching course at the university extension. Jeffrey apparently played with the kids for a while, they were playing horsey, and then at 7 p.m. he puts Kristen to bed. She was 2 years old at the time. Not long after, 5-year-old Kimberly goes to bed too. Colette gets home at around 9:40 p.m. They sit on the sofa for a while watching telly together, but then Colette tires and decides to go to bed. Jeffrey then fell asleep on the sofa, and that was in the early hours, so that would now make it the 17th. At around 3:42 a.m, an emergency phone call was made by Jeffrey. He spoke very quietly into the phone in hushed tones, and he said, "Help, 544 Castle Drive, stabbing. 544 Castle Drive, stabbing, hurry." The operator then heard the sound of the receiver either crash against a wall or on the floor. It took less than 10 minutes for the military police to get there. They looked around the house, it seemed all locked up, it was very dark inside. They go around the back and they noticed that the shutter door is closed but that it wasn't locked, and the door behind that was wide open. The sergeant walks in, ends up in the master bedroom eventually, and runs around to the front shouting, "Tell them to get Womack ASAP." Now Womack, for those of you who may not know, was actually a military hospital. They discovered Colette on the floor of the master bedroom. She had been clubbed repeatedly. Her arms had actually been broken, probably trying to defend herself. She had been stabbed numerous times with a knife and an ice pick. A torn pajama top was found draped over her body. They also found the knife next to her body too. Over the head of their headboard, the word pig was written in blood, and it was later discovered that that was Colette's blood. Jeffrey lay next to her. He was face down and he was wounded, but still alive. He managed to tell them to check on his kids, which they did. And once more, they were met with a horrific scene. Kimberly and Kristen had been brutally murdered. Jeffrey was taken out on a stretcher to Womack Hospital, where the staff there found that his wounds were nowhere near as severe as anybody else's in that house. He had cuts, bruises, fingernail scratches to his face. He had a mild concussion and a single stab wound to his chest. That stab wound had caused his lung to partially collapse as well. He spent 9 days in hospital before he was finally released. So you may at this point be asking, what happened? Well, this is a story that Jeffrey told. It was around 2 a.m. He was cleaning up and getting ready to go to bed. He goes upstairs and he finds that Kristen is actually in his bed with Colette on his side, and she has wet the bed. So not wanting to get in a wet bed or not wanting to awake Colette, he takes Kristen to her own bed and he takes a blanket and goes downstairs to sleep on the sofa. He's then awoken early hours in the morning by his wife screaming and shouting for help and shouting his name. As he got up to help, he was attacked by 3 male intruders. 1 was black, 2 were white. The shorter of the 2 white men wore lightweight, possibly surgical gloves. A 4th intruder he described as a white female with long blonde hair, wearing high-heeled knee-length boots, and this white floppy hat, which partially occluded her face. She apparently stood near a lit candle, chanting, "Acid is groovy, kill the pigs." Now, around this time, what I haven't actually mentioned was Charles Manson had been rampaging. He had recently been caught, so that was all in the news, and that is kind of what it looked like this was happening. Like, these people were basing what they were doing off Charles Manson with, you know, down to writing pigs on the wall and etc. So carrying on with his tale, he said that 3 men attacked him with a club and an ice pick. During the struggle, his pajama top was pulled over his head and ended up around his wrist, and he managed to use that to fend off a lot of the attacks. But eventually, the attackers managed to knock him unconscious. That was in the living room. When he came to, they had all left. He went to the girls' room first, tried to do CPR on them, was unsuccessful, went in the bedroom to find his wife, and then he also tried to find a pulse with her too. When he couldn't find one, he draped his pajama top over her body, probably not wanting to look at it anymore because obviously it's very upsetting, and then he called the military police. The Criminal Investigation Division of the Army issued a description of gang imitators of the Manson family. As I've already informed you, that was around the time that this case happened. But the CID wasn't actually used to dealing with murders, and so they were later accused of sending in too many men that trampled the scene and trampled evidence. As they come through the crime scene, what they thought was very odd was that there was a huge lack of violence in the living room where Jeffrey actually was, where he was supposedly attacked. Just outside the door, they found the knife, ice pick, and wooden club. They didn't get any fingerprints from them though, because they had actually been wiped clean, and Jeffrey claimed that he hadn't actually seen them before, even though it was thought that they were possibly from that household. They tried to set up a roadblock, but the problem with it is that the army base was an open base, and so it was very, very difficult to do so. And they found no sign of the attackers that Jeffrey described. They also found some other strange things, and that was all of the family members had different blood types. Now, normally, you know, some of them share the same blood type, but they didn't. They each had their own separate blood type, which was different with all 4 of them. And they could, from that, pinpoint exactly who was where in the house because they had their own blood type. And those blood types told a completely different story to the one Jeffrey did. Not only that, they found fibers of Jeffrey's pajamas under the bodies and around the house, which also didn't match to what you were claiming had happened. 6 weeks after this brutal attack, he was taken in for questioning. Initially, he said he'd take a lie detector, then he refused. On the 1st of May, he was formally charged with 3 counts of murder by the army itself. They decided instead of a trial, they would hold an official inquiry, which they did. They offered him an army lawyer, but he didn't want an army lawyer. He brought in a civilian lawyer called Bernie Siegel. Straight away, Bernie's claiming that 20 men went in there defacing evidence. They defaced the fingerprints, that they lost evidence, that they failed to collect evidence. He went on to say how Jeffrey had no motive to kill his family whatsoever, and that his proof that, in Jeffrey's words, hippies did it, was that Colette's jewelry box had blood on it and 2 gold rings was missing from it. All right, well, it must have been hippies then, because they stole those 2 rings. He also said that he knew who the woman in the floppy hat was. He claimed it was an 18-year-old drug addict called Helena Stokely. She, on occasion, was known to wear a floppy hat and a blonde wig. Helena, again, was unfortunately a drug addict. She didn't have a clue where she was that night, what she'd done that night, and so, you know, that was really unfortunate that she was dragged into it, and she just didn't have an alibi and didn't know essentially what was going on. Throughout it all, they portrayed Jeffrey as this loving family man, a well-respected army captain with no motive whatsoever. In October, the army dismissed the charges due to lack of evidence, and he was honorably discharged in December of 1970. Jeffrey was quick to begin anew. He moved far away, leaving his army barracks boarded up, basically like the day it was done. Like, you know, nothing was changed, it was just boarded up, and that was left. like that. He moved to Long Beach. He got a new job in St. Mary's Medical Center in the A&E department. He dated numerous women. He went on to buy a 34-foot boat and a seafront condominium. He also began appearing on television where he would slate the army for their incompetence. All the while he's living it up with this new life, Alfred Kassab, who was obviously Colette's stepfather, was looking into the inquiry and the case further. Now, from the beginning, Alfred supported Jeffrey and thought that he was a good man, that he had nothing to do with these murders. But as he's looking into this inquiry, he's seeing all these things that don't really match and don't really line up, and he begins thinking that Jeffrey's lied about something. Alfred went to the scene of the crime. The army actually signed 8 agents and opened it all up for him to try it, because they wanted to try and find this killer too. When this was all done, it was recommended that a civilian prosecution of Jeffrey MacDonald would take place. And throughout this case, you will see that Alfred was quite pinnacle to it, because even though they recommended that, it didn't mean that, you know, the law had to actually do it. And so he fought for that. He fought for 2 years. And finally, 5 years after it had all happened, Jeffrey was finally indicted. He was also allowed to go back to work because the Supreme Court found that his constitutional rights had been violated. That meant that it was down to the Supreme Court now. They were the only ones that could order a trial. So Alfred carried on pushing. He carried on trying to get Jeffrey to stand trial. Went on air, you know, everything he could, he did, until they finally agreed in June of 1977 to accept the case for consideration. Bernie Siegel said it was unfair, and Jeffrey was convinced that he would not get convicted, that they didn't have a cause for conviction whatsoever, but the court disagreed. 9 years after the brutal murder of his family, in July of 1979, Jeffrey finally stood trial. So basically, Bernie really tried to concentrate on portraying Jeffrey as this family man that had no motive, that would not kill his family because he adored them. He was an army captain, he was a medical doctor. Why would he kill his children and pregnant wife? Like, why? What he didn't want to do was focus on the evidence that they had that said a different story. He was just gonna sort of let that slide and not even comment on it at all. His main goal was just to portray Jeffrey as that. Whereas obviously the prosecution figured that if the evidence basically told a story that Jeffrey did it, then they wouldn't even have to find a motive behind it because he did it, essentially. So the prosecution came forward and showed Jeffrey's pajama top that he had admitted putting over Colette after he found her body after she was already dead. Well, it had holes in it, and when you folded it up in a certain way, the 48 holes in it matched the 22 wounds that were found on her body. So that, along with the bloodstains, that obviously told a different story, along with all the fibers that they found, put forward a completely different version of events to what Jeffrey said had happened. They claimed that they believed an argument had started between the pair. Maybe about his infidelity, maybe about the children's bedwetting, who knows at this point. As it got worse, he hit Colette and knocked her down. She grabbed a club, a piece of wood, I don't know what it was, to like try and defend herself. Kimberly was woken up by her parents by the kerfuffle, and she goes into the room and tries to rescue her mum. Colette hit Jeffrey with a club, and he grabbed it and tried to hit her back, apparently accidentally hitting Kimberly in the process, knocking her out. He picks her up, takes her to the bedroom, and that was when he decided he was going to make it look like an outside attack. The bloodstains show that Colette must have run to Kristen's room next to protect her little girl, but of course Jeffrey followed her. He attacked her with a club again. It's believed that that is when her arms were broken, and he knocked her out and carried her to the main bedroom, and then he killed Kristen. He then went round and attacked all 3 bodies with an ice pick, wrote "pig" on the wall, stabbed himself, and then rang for the military police. To back Jeffrey up, they brought in poor Helena again, who once more, like before, still didn't remember anything. And she changed her story a lot. She wasn't reliable at all. At one point, she actually claimed that she did it, and she claimed that she did it with these certain men, but then there was never any evidence to tie these men to the scene, and so it was just all a big mess. The jury was actually taken out to view the crime scene. As I said, it was boarded up, and it was basically untouched for years, and so they just went in, and they were able to look around. And then as the trial began to come to an end, the judge said something which really got me and is so true. He said, "Things don't lie, but people do." Once more, Jeffrey was very convinced that he would not get convicted. After deliberating for just 6.5 hours, Even though it was thought they would be gone a lot longer than that, the jury came back with their verdict. Some of them even cried as they gave the verdict. It was a very emotional scene. Jeffrey MacDonald was found guilty of the second-degree murder of Kimberly and Colette. He was also found guilty of the first-degree murder of Kristen, and he was sentenced to life. The reason he was given first-degree murder for Kristen was that the jury saw that as very cold and calculated. Like, he had killed his wife and daughter and son essentially in a fit of pure rage and anger, just lashing out. But Kristen was different. He actually thought about it and went over and murdered her to try and make it seem like somebody else had done it, kind of thing. Hers was just cold-blooded murder. There was no other way about it. Jeffrey maintained his innocence as he was taken away. His legal team appealed many times, and within a year, the court came back and agreed that Jeffrey was actually denied a speedy trial, and because of that, he was released from prison. I know, right? Seriously? In December of 1981, people gathered around the steps of the Supreme Court once more to appeal. The appeal was to try and get Jeffrey back in prison. Of course, he was there proclaiming his innocence, and so was Alfred proclaiming his guilt, essentially. He was saying that literally a jury found him guilty of murder. So why is that not enough? Like, he's still out here. He's out of jail at the moment. Put him back, please. On the 31st of March in 1982, the Supreme Court ruled that Jeffrey MacDonald's constitutional rights had not been violated, and despite further appeals, that his sentence would be upheld. And he was finally returned back to prison. Now we skip ahead a whole bunch of years. In August of 2002, Jeffrey gets married, whilst in prison, to Catherine Courage. I apologise if I've said that name wrong, I probably have. Apparently the two first met a while ago, like a long time ago. She apparently contacted him in a letter in 1977 saying that she could try and offer some help with his legal case. And that is how they got reacquainted. The friendship grew from there, and they actually got married while he was incarcerated in federal prison in California, but he was later moved out of that prison. Jeffrey MacDonald is currently 77 and he's serving his life sentence in a federal prison in Maryland. And to this day, he maintains his innocence. Colette's mother, Mildred, and stepfather, Alfred, both died in 1994. Mildred passed away on the 19th of December, and Alfred passed away on the 24th of October. As his health was declining, he recorded a tape message in 1989. He stated that he wanted this tape message to be played at any future hearings. In the message, he said, "I want to be sure he serves out his sentence in a way it should be served out. I don't want him walking the streets." And so far, it has been. So, you know, he can rest in peace with the knowledge of that, hopefully. But there we have it. Please do let me know what you guys think on this one. Do you think that Jeffrey is innocent, even though he's found guilty by the jury? Or do you think that he did it, that he's definitely guilty of the crime? I know exactly what I think. Personally, I think that judge got it spot on. That things don't lie, but people do. So yeah, that's the end of the case. If you guys have enjoyed this video, give me a big thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel for similar content. Anyway, guys, that's all I have today on the case of Jeffrey MacDonald. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.